Mr. Zhao, a wealthy Chinese businessman, received an invitation to Macau's most exclusive VIP gambling room, unaware that a carefully staged trap was waiting for him. When he arrived, an attendant guided him to a luxurious suite that occupied the entire floor. Professional dealers executed every move with mechanical precision. Around him, other patrons nursed drinks and exchanged quiet conversations. Everything operated with seamless coordination, just as he expected from an event of this caliber. But in reality, something was very wrong. As the night wore on, he felt unusually disoriented. His judgment seemed clouded. No matter what he played, no matter the strategy, he just kept losing. It wasn't just bad luck, but something else entirely. By morning, he had lost millions of dollars. Mr. Zhao was just one of a dozen victims. What he didn't realize was that he'd been handpicked by a group of con artists behind one of Macau's most sophisticated scams. The Macau police were about to uncover a scheme so audacious, so meticulously constructed, that it would redefine the boundaries of organized fraud. This is the story of how a criminal network turned the trappings of luxury into a scam, and how 16 people orchestrated a multi-million-dollar illusion that preyed on trust, status, and a promise of exclusivity. The mastermind behind the operation was a 46-year-old man from China's Shun district, but everyone only knew him as Wong. Police records revealed almost nothing about him. No prior arrests, no links to organized crime, and no background in casino operations. Shun itself was an unremarkable district in China, a place of factories, small businesses, and modest neighborhoods, the last place you'd expect a criminal empire to begin. Yet between 2010 and 2012, Wong orchestrated at least 19 successful heists, each extracting millions from wealthy mainland Chinese gamblers. While gambling is illegal in mainland China, Macau, a special administrative region, is the legal exception. So for many, this was the only place they could legally play big. Wong had studied how Macau's legitimate VIP rooms operated. He understood these rooms catered to mainland high rollers through personal connections and intermediaries called junket operators. The entire system ran on discretion and trust. They relied on a person who made the introduction. If someone they knew vouched for a VIP room, that was enough authentication. Wong saw the opening. He would infiltrate existing networks through mutual contacts. He would build a fake VIP set and have trusted middlemen deliver the invitations. The victims would do the rest. They'd see the exclusive invitation as proof of legitimacy. They'd see the luxurious suite and professional dealers as confirmation. They wouldn't ask questions, because asking questions would mean doubting their own status, their own connections, and their own judgment. The exclusivity itself became the authentication. Wong couldn't run the operation alone. He needed a team, at least 15 people, to make the set convincing. But Wong didn't turn to seasoned criminals. He went back to Shun and found his crew among farmers, factory workers, and the unemployed. Ordinary people under economic pressure, desperate enough to take the risk, and loyal enough to keep quiet if things went wrong. Recruiting them had practical advantages: no criminal records, low expectations, and easy to control through simple cash payments. Each person only knew what they needed to know. The roles carefully compartmentalized to prevent overlap, which made it easier to cut ties with any liabilities. But the mainland crew solved only half the problem. Wong needed someone in Macau, a local who could manage logistics, renting luxury suites without raising flags, storing equipment between jobs, and knowing which hotels had lax security, and which staff could be bribed. That's where Quan came in. Unemployed, but well-connected. He quickly became Wong's right hand in Macau, handling the logistics behind every move. Dealers learned to shuffle and handle chips with professional precision. Others became fake gamblers, betting heavily to create excitement and bait real victims into wagering more. Some posed as VIP room managers or security personnel. In uniform, they looked every bit as legitimate as real casino staff. The most critical role may have been the hosts, one attractive woman who did more than just greet guests. She put them at ease, gained their trust with soft conversation, and always made sure they drank what was offered. But that was only one part of the illusion. The entire setup, from the tables to the chips, was crafted to withstand scrutiny from people who played in real VIP rooms. Every detail had to look, feel, and function exactly as expected. No shortcuts, no tells. The first challenge was the baccarat tables. Real casino models were built with solid hardwood frames and professional-grade felt, designed to be permanent fixtures. Wong sourced collapsible baccarat tables nearly identical to real casino models. When disassembled, they fit neatly into large suitcases, ready to be reassembled on site without drawing attention. The chips were a more complex challenge. Casino chips aren't just plastic. They're precision crafted, designed to be hard to counterfeit. A legitimate high-denomination chip from a Macau casino weighs exactly 10 grams. The material gives it a specific sound when stacked, a certain feel to the hand. The edges are textured, the print is sharp. Wong's counterfeits matched all of it. The weight, the texture, even the sound. To anyone handling them, they felt completely authentic, but they held no value outside his operation. The surveillance equipment added another layer of detail. Real VIP rooms have cameras placed throughout their space. Wong installed fake cameras and monitors, positioned exactly where they should be. They didn't record anything, but they completed the illusion of a monitored, controlled environment. At the entrance, he placed a metal detector. In real VIP rooms, these are used to scan for weapons or hidden recording devices. Wong's served no actual function. It was there to sell the illusion of security, just like everything else. The real weapon was the cards. Wong didn't leave anything to chance. He used pre-arranged decks, every card in a fixed position, mapped out in advance. The dealers memorized the exact sequences, so when a deck went into play, the outcome was already decided. But even decks that are rigged had their limits. Seasoned gamblers might start noticing strange patterns. They might question the odds or watch the dealer's hands a little too closely. That's where the sedatives came in, administered through specifically prepared cocktails. The dosage was precise. Victims wouldn't pass out. They'd simply become less observant, less likely to question why they kept losing hand after hand. Every element worked in sync. Wong had built a portable system that could extract millions in a single night and be completely dismantled within hours. The equipment would be packed into suitcases, transported to a warehouse, and stored until the next operation. By mid-2011, Wong's operation had been running for over a year. The system worked because it was designed to exploit shame. Victims who realized they'd been conned were too embarrassed to report it, too concerned about admitting they'd been foolish enough to gamble in an unauthorized room. The victim was a mainland Chinese businessman, lured to Macau with a familiar pitch. The night started small. He lost around 400,000 Hong Kong dollars. Nothing unusual for a high roller. But then, the hosts pressed harder, more drinks, and more reassurance. When his cash ran out, they offered him credit, more chips. Keep playing. Your luck will turn. Well, it didn't turn. By the time the night ended, he was 3.5 million Hong Kong dollars in debt. But something felt wrong. Maybe it was the location, a hotel suite instead of a real casino floor. Maybe it was how consistently he'd lost, despite playing sound strategy. Maybe it was the hazy details in his memory, the way the night felt disjointed in retrospect. The victim grew suspicious, and the answers didn't add up. Unlike the others who had been conned before him, this businessman didn't absorb the loss quietly. He went to Macau's judiciary police and filed a complaint. He described the suite, the setup, the strange circumstances. He admitted he'd been gambling outside official channels, a risk in itself, but insisted something criminal had occurred. The judiciary police took the complaint seriously. They began investing quietly, looking for patterns. Where were the other victims? Other suspicious gambling setups in hotel suites? The answers came quickly. This wasn't an isolated incident. The same syndicate had been operating these fake VIP rooms repeatedly, moving between hotels, assembling and disassembling their portable casino across multiple operations. By late 2011, investigators had identified the pattern and began surveillance. Intelligence indicated Wong's crew was back in Macau, setting up another fake VIP room inside a five-star hotel's residential suite. Another victim had been recruited. Another scam was about to unfold. But this time, the police were ready. In the morning of February 12th, a tactical team raided the suite. They struck while the crew was still setting up, before any gamblers arrived. 16 people were arrested on the spot. Wong, the mastermind from Shun. Guan, the Macau logistics coordinator. The dealers, the fake gamblers, the hosts, the security staff. Essentially, the entire crew assembled for the job. At the scene, police found about 100 million Hong Kong dollars in counterfeit casino chips. For the 16 who were caught, the operation was over. The bust made headlines across Macau and mainland China, but there was no recovering the money. The counterfeit chips held no value. The cash paid to Wong's operation had long since been divided and spent. The only consolation was that the perpetrators would face justice. In 2013, after a trial that revealed the full scope of the scheme, all 16 defendants were convicted. Sentences ranging from 18 months to 3 years. But interrogation revealed a final twist. A third mastermind had escaped capture. He vanished before the raid, disappearing back into mainland China. Investigators suspected Wong and Quan were merely frontmen, and that the third figure was the true architect of the operation. The one who understood how to exploit the psychology of wealth and turn trust into a weapon. In the end, those answers were never found. What remained was a cautionary tale about trust, exclusivity, and a world built on chance. Thank you for watching.